Do you have health and fitness goals that you haven't reached yet? This is the Leaders of Transformation podcast. And on this show, we interview difference makers and world changers who are disrupting for good. I'm Nicole Jansen, and our guest today is Mario Tomic. And he is a coach and fitness YouTuber from Barcelona, Spain, with over 200,000 subscribers and over 20 million views. And he has personally helped thousands of entrepreneurs and busy professionals improve their health and achieve their fitness goals. And today we are going to talk about how to develop a healthy mind and body and finish 2021 strong. So if you're ready, post in the chat, I'm ready, and tell us where you're listening from. We have listeners in over 140 countries, so you just never know who's going to be dialing in. I'm aging myself. Oh my goodness. But tuning in. And during this interview, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and comments. You can post them in the chat. We will address them as we go along. We'd love to hear from you. And before I go any further, I do want to do a shout out to Oscar Hamilton, who recommended Mario as a guest. I always like to acknowledge those that support the show. So thank you for the team at Oscar Hamilton. And one more thing, our show is brought to you by my training and coaching company. And so if you're a leader who wants to be better, do better, and make a greater impact in the world, go to leadersoftransformation.com/coaching and book a free consult with me. We'll talk about your goals. We'll talk about the opportunities that you have and how to break through to the next level so you can be the kind of leader that you are capable of being. So again, go to leadersoftransformation.com/coaching and you can click on the scheduling link there. All right, let's bring our guest on. Mario, welcome to Leaders of Transformation.
Great to be here. It's a pleasure of mine.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. And there's so many people that are in this space of health and fitness. But when I saw your material that Oscar Hamilton had sent over, I realized that you have, this is your life, this is what you do, and you've been doing it for so many years. But I loved there's a lot of people have, but I loved your approach to the mind and body connection to it. So talk to us a little bit about your unique approach, maybe dive into that a little bit, maybe even how you got into that space yourself.
I think that's a great observation. I'm happy they sent over the materials because to approach a physical change that we all want to lose weight, build a bit of muscle, maybe get stronger or whatever, it really boils down to the decisions you make. If you then boil that down to what we do, it's really our habits that govern our lives. And then how do you change your habits? You have to change your mind. So it does really start with your mindset and more embracing a side of yourself to basically allow yourself to change. And I think this is one of those hardest things that we fail to acknowledge because there's a short-term change and there's also a long-term change. I'm in the business of long-term changes. So the clients I work with, entrepreneurs, professionals, as you mentioned, and had the honor of working with a lot of people. They want that long-term change. And I think that's really an important place to start because anybody can do a diet. You can discipline yourself to do something for 30 days, for 60 days. Hell, you can do it for 6 months, but you regain the weight. And I think this is one of those things we know 95% of people will regain weight when they diet. People say diets don't work. Theoretically, diets do work. People lose weight, but they don't actually change their lifestyle. So it ends up being sort of a temporary thing they just discipline themselves to do, having that thought, well, after that, I'm going to go back to what I was doing before. So I will, and now sacrifice a little bit to win later. And we know that doesn't work. So what I've kind of specialized over the years is really how do you create that permanent change? How do you shift your identity? How to add new layers to your identity? So if you don't see yourself as someone who's into sports or fitness or eating healthy and that may be currently outside of your identity, how do you add those layers on top and become that type of person where you're naturally doing these things? And it's not something you feel like you have to do. It's something that you naturally want to do. And it's also such a strong set of habits that you're not really thinking about it, because that's the only way to get out of this, what I would call a motivation and discipline cycle, which is you start very motivated, motivation goes away, then you use discipline and willpower to bridge the gap for a little bit, and that runs away, and then you fall off. And the only way out of that is to invest that motivation and that discipline into building habits that can be long-lasting habits that you can cultivate, nurture, and allow yourself enough time for them to really take root and become those habits that will be permanently there. Because at the end of the day, we're kind of fighting 10, 20, God knows how many years of conditioning here. So we can't expect these things to happen overnight. So I'm very much focused on how do you start from within and start making some strategic changes in how you make decisions, setting standards for yourself, minimums that you're not going to go below, and then really focusing on how to master consistency, because that's really at the end of the day the primary skill you want to have if you want to change anything in your life, whether it's your business, your fitness, or whatever. It's really about consistency or perfection. Consistency matters way more than your intensity. If you burn out in a couple of weeks, or if you do something really hard for, I don't know, a month or two, it doesn't really matter if you drop the ball later on. So I'm very focused on teaching clients and people in general through my content how to be consistent, how to make this a part of your life, and how to enjoy the process, which I think really is what the key and the goal then naturally arises from you doing the right actions over time and letting that time work for you.
So, with that in mind, what are some of the habits, the most important things? If somebody's looking at, by the time of this, this live stream and the recording, we are close to about 3 months left in the year. And not to say that it's, this is the only time to get fit or whatever. It's not a time frame. Obviously, this is our life. But if you look at these next few months, what would you tell someone who says, I want to get I want to finish the year strong. I want to get in shape, start the process to then continue next year rather than waiting to the next year. Everybody waits to the New Year's resolutions, which don't last more than 3 weeks on average. So what would you tell them to do? Like, where would they start this process of changing their lifestyle? Is what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And make a decision to it now. Don't wait for the New Year's. Don't wait for resolutions. Don't wait after Thanksgiving. Don't wait after whatever arbitrary date or holiday. I know there is that fresh start effect and that fresh start bias that we all have. Everything's going to be different starting Monday, and then Monday comes around, then the next Monday or whatever, New Year's. That doesn't work really. It's as easy as it's ever going to be. Is just start now. And when you are making a decision to start now, it's really about setting up what I would call a minimum viable plan that allows you to experience the maximum learning with the least amount of effort. And when I say learning, I really mean learning how to be consistent with it. So instead of jumping into a 7 days a week, 2 hours in the gym workout, you're looking at what is a minimal viable plan that I can actually commit to right now. That might be, let's say, 3 sessions for 45 minutes. You take a program that's a very basic full body program, and you just do those movements and focus on learning rather than on performance. Because one thing that I've noticed with entrepreneurs and in general the clientele that I work with, we're kind of all a bit of type A. We like to measure things out. We're very data driven. We're very KPI, OKR, performance. What does the data say about our progress? And that type of mindset is a great mindset in domains that you're an expert at already. So if you're an entrepreneur and you have 10 years, 15 years of experience, you're a salesperson, or you're a lawyer, or you're an accountant, obviously that's very important. But when you're doing something new or something that you haven't been successful with in the past, that is a very dangerous mindset to be in. So you want to move away from that performance mindset and something I would call more like an growth or an iterative mindset or learning mindset, where essentially your main goal is consistency. Consistency is a goal in itself. It's to just embrace the process, to show up and worry about the results later, but show up now and make that a part of your daily, weekly habit, weekly ritual set. Now, the training is one component. Obviously, what you put in your body is a whole different ball game here, and that's really what a lot of people are struggling with. That's why you end up gaining weight at the end of the day. Yes, it's an activity. Yes, it's all the other things, but it is really what's going on with your nutrition. So here I would start doing some basic research, which I would recommend always starting with what is your ideal caloric intake? So roughly where you should be as an individual based on your height, weight, activity levels. Based on that, what's your ideal protein intake? I talk a lot about these things in my YouTube videos, and I really do feel like every human should be aware of your rough numbers. It's sort of how you do your taxes, how you do your budgeting, your finances. This is your food budget. You have a weekly spending budget, you have a monthly spending budget, you have your expenses, you have your income. Well, same here. You have your intake, you have your expenditure, you have your numbers. Once you're aware of your numbers, you have something that you can work with, something that's in your control. Then you can start with some basic food tracking and journaling and see where you're at. You track your body weight, you see how that's trending. Is it going up or down? You track your food intake using apps like MyFitnessPal or similar apps that can track your food. And you start from there. And that awareness alone, we've seen in research that can ultimately lead to changes without even trying to make changes. Because naturally, as soon as you see that something is wrong, you will not gravitate to try to fix it. So I would say that's a good place to start. And outside of training and nutrition, I really do think this is a conversation about overall lifestyle. So maybe you're listening to this right now and you're so stressed out that there's so many bottlenecks right now preventing you from even getting started on anything. And I do feel like there's a lot of value in a mental and a physical declutter, just to start saying no and removing things that are irrelevant or that don't really contribute. Or maybe you've been hiding in your business and inventing busy work, ignoring your fitness and your relationships and other things in life that are really important. So I think it has to start with radical honesty about certain things that have to go and be replaced with healthier habits. So maybe you have certain rituals right now that you're using to cope with stress that is not supposed to be there to begin with. And you are just not really that good at handling stress and learning how to relax and getting out there in nature, taking regular walks, working on your mindset, meditating, breathing, reading books, really getting yourself out of that constant sympathetic fight or flight and try to engage more of that parasympathetic, that rest and digest state where you can really think calmly, think creatively, and without putting that much pressure on yourself. Because I do feel like in this world that we live in today, we are just under so much pressure that we also put on ourselves that we're ultimately unable to make any high quality decisions. And that lack of mental bandwidth prevents you from seeing obvious solutions and the simplest solutions that are right in front of you about eating healthy, getting in your vegetables, making sure you're doing groceries, basic planning. We don't do any of that because we're constantly overwhelmed. Our minds are elsewhere. And I do feel like this conversation has to go in that direction as well. So you do a little bit of removal at the same time as you do some adding, because it's not just about adding, adding, and adding. There's only so much. We only have 168 hours a week. So we have to always consider what has to go, what can be more efficient. So instead of being proud that you can, run around on 5 hours of sleep, thinking, well, how did you end up in that situation to be sleep deprived and being an unhappy human being? I mean, how can you make things more efficient potentially, where you can get more sleep, get some time for yourself, and really prioritize some self-care? At some point, it has to be coming from a perspective of, are you giving yourself permission to focus on yourself a little bit? Because I think that's something that entrepreneurs have a really hard time and they're struggling with, especially those with families and always putting other people in front of them. At some point, you have to make that decision to allow yourself to do a little bit more self-care.
I want to do a shout out to a few people that are from Toronto actually watching. So, Ellen Stewart and Ash Silva, thanks for watching. We appreciate you being here. And if you have questions, please post it in the chat, uh, and we'll be happy to answer those questions. I love what you said there, Mario, about the permission. And you talked about stress and you talked about removing things. And it's not just about adding. I love that because in my coaching, a lot of times entrepreneurs will come to me and they are the type A high achievers. And they're like, what do I need to be doing more of? And I say, well, first of all, the first question is, what do you need to be doing less of? What do you need to say no to so that you can actually have space and energy to say yes to the things that are most important? And one of those things, like you just talked about, is self-care. And so it's not about training 7 days a week, pounding the pavement and doing it that way. Because if you're tired, I had somebody one time who said to me, I only sleep 4 hours a day, and was proud of it. And I realized that when I was growing up, I was that invincible 20 something year old who thought I didn't need any sleep until my body said, I'm not coming on this journey with you if we're going to continue this way. So I needed to stop, check in, and see what my body needed so that the best version of me could show up. And that's why I loved what you were talking about in all your videos. I notice it on YouTube. And this is also a plug to follow Mario on YouTube and check out his channel because he's got a lot of great videos there. In those, you're talking about the practices, you're talking about the things to do, what to eat, how to work out, and so forth. But you're weaving in this mindset piece because that is what determines the behaviors. Beliefs drive behaviors. And so our mindset drive our behaviors because, of course, belief drives our mindset. And so I love that approach. Why don't we talk a little bit more about kind of shift gears into some of the things that some people might be thinking, okay, so I need to get my mindset in order and create some space and self-care and all of that. Okay, so in terms of the habits, what do I actually do? I know there's some questions like, and you talk about this in one of your YouTube videos, talking about how do we burn belly fat? What do you think about keto and paleo and 75 Hard and P90X and all of these other programs. And so let's dive in a little bit to let them know, give them a taste of what they'll experience with, whether it's through your YouTube or hiring you. And you've got some programs as well.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic question, because what you see a lot on social media and in anywhere in general media, it's a lot of arguments about tactics. So whether it's keto, paleo, whether it's low carb, high carb, specific diet, whatever name diet you want to mention, those are tactics that essentially are based upon, well, some of them at least, on principles that we need to understand how ultimately dieting works. So if you want to lose body fat, we know very, very clearly at this point in time, with decades of scientific research, as well as tens of thousands, at least millions of people at this point, we know in order to lose body fat, you need to be in a caloric deficit, meaning a negative energy balance, meaning that the intake of food has to be lower than the expenditure. So you ultimately, or the expenditure has to be higher than your intake of food. So if you want to put it that way, you are going to start utilizing that stored body fat to get rid of it. And that's the purpose of that body fat you have. And the only way to get rid of it is to reduce the caloric intake and match that with a higher amount of exercise to ultimately get in that negative energy balance. That's the only way. And that's the principle that we can base upon whatever type of tactic you want to use, because ultimately you want to do the diet, whichever one feels the easiest to you to adhere to that calorie deficit. So whether that's a higher carbohydrate intake, a lower carbohydrate intake, whether that's keto, whatever. I don't know many people that can actually do keto successfully long-term. Maybe in the short term, that's fine. But a lot of clients have tried it in the past, didn't work out for them. I'm more for a balanced approach. But regardless of that, if you're getting your ideal caloric intake, you're getting a sufficient amount of protein, majority of your diet is based on unprocessed healthy foods, you're doing your proper groceries, you're planning your meals, you're going to lose weight. If you're in a caloric deficit, getting your protein, healthy food, you're going to lose weight. That's it. It's inevitable. I mean, that's really how it works. It's a law of thermodynamics at play here. So the certainty is 100% if you do things correctly. Now, the problem here is that people put tactics before principles. They're going to talk about, okay, paleo is the only way to go, or this is the only way. Ultimately, every diet has to trick you to get into a caloric deficit. So however way it is, whether it's cutting carbs, fats, removing all your processed favorite foods that you like to eat. And the way I like to approach this is from a perspective of, is this the type of approach that you can see yourself doing for the rest of your life? I mean, that's the most important question you got to ask yourself. Like, if I remove pretty much every piece of food that I enjoy, even though most of the foods I do enjoy are healthy foods, like things like blueberries and stuff like that. But let's say I remove pizzas. If I want to go, let's say, with my kids and have pizza on Fridays, I can't do that anymore. Is that the best diet for me to follow? Right? I mean, what am I going to do with that? If I'm cutting out all the carbs, let's say we got a planned trip to Italy. What am I going to eat in Italy if I just cut out all the carbs? Right? I mean, I can power through that, but am I setting myself up for failure with the wrong tactic when I could have applied the principles in a different way that would match that situation that I'm in? So I think it's really about being very strategic, thinking long term, thinking about which foods. And this is stuff that I do with my clients. What foods do you prefer? How does your diet look right now? Let's obviously move into a high quality diet. Let's handle that qualitative part of the diet, but let's also then handle the quantity of the diet, the portion sizes, how much you're eating, when you're eating, the timing, and then we can go into greater optimization, which is for energy levels, longevity, all the other stuff that really comes with food. But at the end of the day, if you want to lose body fat, you really got to get in a caloric deficit. I mean, that's the truth. And whether it's belly fat, stomach fat, face fat, chest fat, back fat, whatever fat you're looking at, there's no way to spot reduce any of those areas. You really have to get in an overall calorie deficit and just let that body fat go away, and it's going to take time. Especially for men, the fat that's in the midsection, the belly fat, is going to be the last one to go. There's always going to be some body fat there left, while the other area is also getting leaner and leaner. For women, it's typically hips and thighs, where it's going to take the longest to get rid of that body fat. But as you keep losing weight, as you keep getting leaner and leaner, eventually you will get rid of those areas as well. Am I saying it's going to be easy? No. I mean, it might sound simple. Simple doesn't mean easy. So the actual follow through is the problem. It's not the action. That's the set. It's not the setup. It's not the law of how it works. It's how do you actually follow through on this consistently for long enough for these changes to occur. And that's, I mean, for us humans, we suck at stuff that has this second and third order consequent effect that's positive for us. We like stuff that's immediately gratifying and positive, and then God knows what's going to happen in 2-3 months from now. And this is really, when it comes to dieting and fat loss in general, some of those decisions you make right now may not be the most enjoyable in the beginning, But then the second and third order of those consequences is very positive. Maybe the fifth order of those consequences that you get to see your granddaughter's wedding. I mean, thinking a little bit further into the future, and if you can align your mind to start making choices like that, you're going to really start seeing some really positive benefits with that. And that doesn't necessarily even mean that you can't learn to enjoy the first order of consequence as well. I genuinely enjoy going to the gym and training hard. Same thing as I enjoy eating healthy. I honestly feel weird when I skip the gym. It feels like a part of me is just, what are you doing? I mean, this is not you. The same thing is with eating healthy. If I don't eat a salad with my meal, it just feels a little bit weird. I mean, maybe 1 or 2 meals is fine, but if I go for a day or two and all my diet is just really processed and it's not really stuff that I usually eat, my palate is kind of, okay, what is this now? Now, that wasn't always like that. I mean, I was an overweight gamer at some point. I started as a software engineer. I had 45 pounds extra. Diet was horrible. And my palate has completely changed since then. So there's a way to change. It just takes time and it takes commitment. But obviously, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, because you will become that person whose new default are healthy habits, healthy behaviors, and you're paying attention to these things and you're being honest about it yourself as well. If you have a cheat day, cheat weekend, or whatever you want to call it, you got to be honest with yourself. It's very easy to wipe out 5 days of good work in a weekend, because numbers don't lie. I mean, if you have a binge fest on a Saturday, you have a couple of glasses of wine that leads to some extra food and some more wine. You can easily pile up 5,000-6,000 calories across those 2 days, just destroys the whole weekly intake. So I like the numbers approach because I'm a data-driven guy. As I said, I was a software engineer. This is almost like a math problem that we're dealing here. So the numbers don't lie at the end of the day, and I like it because it's very honest. It keeps us accountable, and it has to start with accountability. Really, like we don't like that word, we don't like that practice, but it's the only way forward at some point.
Yeah, I love what you said there about the fat, and which like it may be the last fat that comes off. I think oftentimes our expectations of what we, it's just like anything. You start a business and people, who maybe they're new to business, they start and they expect certain things to happen a certain way, and then it doesn't, and then they get disappointed, and they're like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm just big boned and it doesn't work in the fitness area. And I love what you said there is that it's, and I saw that in one of your videos we talked about, it's coming off your body overall. It's not like you can isolate one area, even if you may work that muscle. It's total calories and all of that, which is really good. Now I've heard this, and I don't know how this plays into the training that you do, but there's 3 body types. Can you talk a little bit about those different body types and how they might lose weight or get lean faster or slower depending on their body type?
Yeah, there's old myth of trying to classify people as an ectomorph, mesomorph, or an endomorph, meaning that you'd be someone who's naturally skinny, someone who is more prone to be muscular and sort of in good shape, and then there's that individual who would be more prone to gaining weight. We know that there are differences between people. Like, we can't say we're all the same. Like, some people definitely gain weight much easier, gaining body fat much easier. Their metabolisms aren't as fast. Some people have naturally faster metabolisms. They're just fidgeting away hundreds of calories every single day. We know that. We know that clearly from overfeeding studies. You feed there's a really cool study on twins. They fed pairs of twins to just be able to have a control group there. They overfed them by 1,000 calories, and they see this one group of twins, so this one pair of twins stores 80% of those calories, then another group stores only 20% of those calories. So their metabolism upregulates so much they just burn off the majority of it, while the other group that had similar genetics, they basically stored all of that. So it really boils down to you as an individual knowing your own metabolism. And this is the process that you learn through managing your nutrition. This is where it goes down to that awareness of your caloric intake, of your energy expenditure. Maybe you're someone who has to do more activity, less activity, but where the cards that you're dealt with, that's what you got to work with. Now, those specific types, they do exist in the real world exactly like that in some percentages, but it varies quite a bit. So, for example, someone could be, from a muscular perspective, having genetically very blessed lower body where they grow muscle very easily in the lower body. So their quads, their hamstrings, their calves and whatnot, their glutes, but their upper body is really struggling. So they have a hard time growing their back, their chest, and their shoulders. It could be the exact opposite. Someone has a really hard time growing lower body. So they're kind of like an ectomorph upper body, mesomorph lower body. So you could almost like say for each part of the body, you could be that. When it comes to storing body fat, that's also very individual. Some people store more body fat in their lower body. For example, with men, as I mentioned earlier, some of the stubborn areas are the belly fat, the love handles. But that isn't necessarily always the case when people are storing body fat. There are some sets of percentages of men that will store a lot of body fat in their lower body. Now, some will not store as much. Some will store a lot of it in their face, their neck, their chest. So it really does depend on your genetics. And that's something obviously we don't have control over yet. Maybe we will in this century, who knows? But at this point in time, what we do know for sure is that if you're overall getting leaner, as you said, paying attention to your total calories, your protein, doing resistance training to retain your muscle and build more muscle, you will eventually get to your personal leanest state. Now, however long that takes, whatever that looks like, is about becoming the best version of yourself. And I'm coming back to when I said really doing this as a way to change your life permanently and doing this as a set of habits for the rest of your life. Because if you're not a competitor, what's the rush? I mean, what's the point? Like if you get there in 6 months versus 5 months, or if you get there 8 months or a year from, what does that change to you practically in your life? I mean, if you've been neglecting this for 15, 20 years and you got a chance now to solve this thing in the next, 8 to 12 months, why not go for it? I mean, you're literally missing out on being the healthiest, highest energy focused version of yourself where you can contribute so much and enjoy your life more, be there for your family. So what's the point? I mean, if you take a little bit longer, I think that's one of those concerns that people will try to come up with a million things, a million scenarios at the start as almost like a way of productively procrastinating on this instead of having a bias to action and just starting to go for it. If you have 100 pounds to lose, if you lose 15 pounds, you've improved your health. Yes, you have 85 to go, for sure. No doubt about that. But you've just improved your health. You've done a lot for your health. So celebrating those small wins and allowing yourself to be happy with those changes, I think is critical, because if you delay that until the very end, you're just going to be miserable through the entire process. And it's going to be very difficult for you to actually get rid of that much weight. And that might be a 2-year journey to lose 100 pounds. Could you do it sooner? Sure. I mean, I know people have lost a lot of weight in 4 or 5 months, no problem. But the key is it healthy? Is it sustainable? Is it something that actually you can do afterwards? So can you adhere to that same type of lifestyle after the fact, after you lost the weight? So it's usually where things fall apart. So I would always urge individuals, like when you're doing this, really commit to this as sort of this thing that is a permanent change rather than something temporary. And that sort of eliminates the worry about, well, when I'm going to get there, what, as long as you're moving in the right direction, as long as the metrics are improving, you're embracing, learning the process, you're getting better and better, the result is inevitable. And I think that's the key.
Well, again, I love your approach because it sounds so simple and so obvious, and it really is. I mean, we all kind of know we need to eat healthy and work and exercise and like you talked about the caloric intake. I mean, these are things that are obvious, and yet so often, as you mentioned, we want the quick fix. We want the thing. It's like, oh, I've been doing this for 15 years, but now I want that quick fix. And again, I relate it to people starting a business or having a relationship, or people saying, I want this to work and it's got to be like microwave style, it's got to happen now or it's not worth it. And I love what you're saying there. Is like, what's the difference between 5 months and 6 months? Okay, so maybe you're getting married and you want to be a certain weight by the time you get married, but ultimately that's just for a day. Like, what does your life look like? And you talk about lifestyle and eating well and so forth. And so yeah, I noticed this weekend, actually I was very busy this weekend. We were helping out with some renovations, so forth. And they tend to, like, they order the pizza and they order the stuff that's like not stuff that I would normally eat. And man, I'm telling you, I felt it on Sunday and yesterday. I was like worn out. And it wasn't just because of the activity, it was because of the food that I had taken in that wasn't normally what I eat. And so, like you said, your body starts to get used to a certain thing. It likes running clean. I think of a Ferrari, it likes to run clean. You put junk in it, it doesn't run as smooth. It might run, but it not may not run as smooth. And I think about a quick story actually. My brother was in Saudi when he was in his late teens, and in Saudi Arabia, the kids get beautiful cars, 15, 16 years old. You buy the license, for your kid, and so forth. And so there's a young guy that came into the garage where it was a auto repair shop, and he came in literally with a Ferrari Testarossa, and he said, "It's chugging." And my brother said, "Ferraris don't chug." Like, what is going on? And so he took him out on a drive, and what he realized is that this kid didn't, he was 15. This kid was 15 years old driving a Ferrari Testarossa, and he didn't realize he didn't know how to drive the car properly. And so he was starting off in third gear. Now, how he ever got the car down the road starting off in third gear is beyond me, but amazing. But as soon as my brother started to drive it the way it was designed to drive it, all the carbon came out. That car was perfectly fine, but it needed the right driver. It needed the right material to work properly. And our bodies are very much like that. And so when we give it the right things, it's cause and effect. And so I love that you talk about that. Just before we wrap up, you are a YouTuber, and I know there's probably some that are listening and saying, this is all great, but I really would like to know how the heck Mario got over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube and 20 million views. So do you have a couple of tips for our aspiring YouTubers? And I would be one of those, where, you've had such tremendous success, and your message is obviously very important. We've talked about that, but it's more than that to be able to get your message out there.
Yeah, I mean, same as my nutrition approach is sort of that 80-20-90-10, where I allow myself maybe 10, 15, 20% of times, like you mentioned, having a pizza and whatnot. And then 80%, it's about really staying course, staying with the plan. Same thing as with YouTube. I mean, the basic things of being consistent over time, publishing content, getting better at it, treating it as a skill. I felt like that was one of the key things. I've been doing YouTube for a long time. I think people often think that there's a magical trick or whatever, and maybe you are an outlier. I would definitely not consider myself one, because it took me many, many years to reach some of these milestones, and I'm very happy with the milestones. Obviously, I'm improving. But yeah, I started in 2014. That was 7 years ago. I mean, it's not something that happened overnight. I started as a kid in my 20s. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, turning on a camera and talking. English is not my native language. I barely even spoke English. When someone watches my old videos, they're like, who is this guy? What is he talking about? I mean, the message was right. I'm coming from the same correct core principles of trying to educate, help, and really see how I can add as much value as possible. But the way I conveyed that value was very different compared to today. So really allow yourself to suck, allow yourself to make a lot of mistakes, and learn through those mistakes. And obviously try to also learn from other people's mistakes. So see if you can emulate success and learn from other successful people. If you notice someone doing a particular style of videos that you like, there's nothing wrong with trying to do a similar style of video or similar edit. How they do their thumbnails, notice how they title their videos, how they do their descriptions and what the video's topics are about. Just really try to not approach this as a hobby, but really try to reverse engineer what's currently working from the people that are actually doing it successfully, the ones that are really crushing it. And that's sort of giving you a starting point that you can then add your own twist to it. But it really does come down to consistency over perfection, because this is a creative pursuit. So there's always going to be that perfectionist side of you that is going to want to over edit the video, over film the video with millions and millions of takes. Like, I'm guilty of that as more than as anybody else. And this is where you kind of have to must allow the videos just to keep coming out and the process to change you, because you will never learn YouTube trying to do it intellectually without making the content. Like, you can't just sit and just read a book about it or watch a course about it or whatever. It is production. It is putting yourself in that uncomfortable situation where you are creating that content, getting live feedback from the audience, and seeing if people like your stuff. Not everybody stuff, at least in the beginning, is just ready to go and goes viral and it crushes it and everybody's happy with that. No, I mean, you might need to refine some ideas. You might need to find your niche, your audience. It need for YouTube some time to actually find who is the audience for this person. It's not just going to happen if you have 2 videos on the platform. Now, if you're a very talented and highly skilled filmmaker, you've done presentations in the past, you're a public speaker, you've done podcasts, for example, you have already an established skill set. The cool thing about YouTube is that you can take those and leverage them immediately because you already know how to present the content in the correct way. So I think, for example, yourself, you have a big advantage compared to someone starting fresh like I did back in the day. But just understand, like, there are certain principles about YouTube you never want to break, like respecting the audience's time. On podcasts, you can just go on and go on with stories and stuff. YouTube is a bit of a different audience. I mean, there are people expecting value from the get-go. You can't just drag on and do like 5 minutes of sponsor stuff and all this kind of like, what am I talking about today? No, you got to just get straight right into it. For example, that's another principle. Observing the length of the videos, the quality of the edit, the audio, the visual. I think there's so much to it, but honestly, at this point, if someone is just kind of thinking about it, maybe someone who's not like yourself, someone who's just starting out and thinking about an idea they want to share, take your phone out and start filming and putting out content. Literally, just do that. And if you don't like it, just delete it after a year. But start doing something, putting yourself out there. Just that camera presence alone is huge. That is something you cannot just, again, intellectually figure out. You have to do it over and over and over and over again to become that skilled person. It's just not going to happen without practice. So it's that everybody has to pay their dues. Maybe for you, it's not 10,000 hours, it's 5,000 hours, whatever amount of hours it is, depending on your skill set. But yes, definitely start thinking about it as an engineer, reverse engineer it, see direction. Some courses and books are a good starting point, but you can only go so far without actually taking in, some practice in and just doing it as, at least a video a week, I would say would be a good starting point.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, and it's the same, you're talking about principles here, right? It's the consistency is what can you do and stay consistent over perfection. And I know when you talk about redoing, oh my goodness, when I first started doing videos, I was like, I hate this because I was retake to get it perfect. And I was like, it's never going to be perfect. So just do it. And just like your workouts, when you talk about working out, just start somewhere. And so it's a great place to end, is to encourage our listeners to just, start somewhere. Start somewhere. Start with your noticing how much you're actually eating. Maybe avoiding those low fat, fattish diets or the low fat foods and just going for real whole clean food and starting there, starting to eliminate the breads and the extras and all of that stuff. And I think about, just any Weight Watchers program also talks about that too. It's like, just start noticing what you're eating. And maybe we don't even realize what we're eating until we start journaling it and becoming aware of well, I don't eat that much, but there's a snack here and a snack there. And maybe there's a weekend binge like Mario talked about. And these things add up, and they add up fast. And in the same way, the little things that you do well also add up and can create a huge tidal wave of impact long term. And so I encourage you to do that. Go to Mario's, of course, his YouTube channel, which is Mario Tomic Official. You can also go to mariotomic.com and all his information is there. Go check out what he's doing. Watch his videos. He's got some really good material on his YouTube channel and is on his website. So I highly recommend you do that. And stay tuned for next week, because next week we have another amazing guest. And we'll look forward to talking with them about leadership and vision and all of that. But in the meantime, go to leadersoftransformation.com. And this is episode 397, which means we have 396 other episodes that you can check out, all sorts of different topics. Talk about mindset. We've talked about that today. There's so many guests that we've had on the show speaking about this. So if you're looking to improve yourself, you're looking to become a leader of transformation, it starts with you. It starts with me. We have to begin with ourselves. Leaders of transformation first start with themselves, and then they get to the point where they start transforming others. Mario started with his own body and then went out from there, and now he can teach other people to do it. And you can too. It's just a process, and stay consistent with it. So we encourage you to go check out all the episodes and additional resources that we have. Thank you for watching. Again, tune in next week for another amazing guest. Until then, have a great week. We look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.